Hello. Diving into an update on this post 40-day or a little bit longer juice fast that has just come to completion over this past week. And yeah, a bunch of perspectives I'd like to jump in here as I've been coaching and doing sessions with many people across the board, from detoxification to more emotional healing, coming into clarity within oneself and their natural creative talents and gifts. All of these things being interconnected as I continue to reiterate through the process of this 40-day juice fast, and look to bring a holistic perspective to the topic of fasting, recognizing that if it is only a focus upon the fasting and the food and the consumption, naturally we will face other difficulties. We'll recognize that there are other elements that can make this journey an effortless process. As I mentioned many times before, the journey of this 40 days was quite effortless. There wasn't really much difficulty during the fast. Naturally, more of the difficulties come from after the fast, breaking the fast. As a famous quote in the community of this detox and fasting world states, it takes only a fool, any fool can fast, but it takes a true master to break the fast. And I, like many, had to kind of embody this principle as the fasting broke last week. And one key piece that I feel like was a core motivation and inspiring element for many people watching was the topic of the 12 to 14 foot black snake, or black serpent as I've called it, that has come out of my body. And this is a mix of mucoid plaque, so you can go and look that up on Google, and fecal matter. And I'm going to put the pictures here again, so I'm going to give a warning and you guys can take a look at that. And so, as you can see, naturally, this is, not so nice. And the funny part is I've had much of this mucoid plaque come up already. So, for someone that may be just doing this for the first time, it would be likely a lot more. But 12 to 14 feet is almost, 2 floors or a floor and a half of mucoid plaque and fecal matter that is coming out of the body. And for many people, this is a common theme, likely much more, and existing in the body for even a longer period of time. I'm still fairly young, and so for those who may be a bit older in physical age, you have this fecal matter that has been in your body for quite a long period. And so this is really, the focus of the core essence of the health perspective, is that if you have, poop in your toilet, stuck in your toilet for years, likely it's going to get your attention. And so, seeing this in these pictures and coming into a recognition that yes, the majority of us do have this in our body. It said, I heard somewhere, I think it's Lauren Lockman, another fasting teacher, who spoke of there being like 1/10 of a gram of every meal that you eat of the food remaining in your body and not fully coming out. So if you add 1/10 of a gram to 20, 30 years of eating meals, it really works out to like something around 15 to 20 pounds of excess fecal matter. And so, again, the toxicity, the disease, the health ailments that so many of us have found ourselves in, this is the core reason for why that is the case. Now, how do we go deeper into this? How do we recognize that, just like I've shared about the movement of the energy in your digestive system coming from relieving and removing this snake from your digestive tract, there's also a movement of emotional energy that is highly important. Movement of emotional energy is movement of the creative and sexual force. And when it's stagnant, we want to eat, we want to consume, we want approval, we want sex, we want all of the physical things in which continue to reiterate our separateness. I have this body, and then there's another body, or I have this body, and then there's the desires out there that I desire and I want to consume and have and take and receive. And so the nature of actually moving that emotional energy, transmuting that creative and sexual force into its highest nature, to alchemizing it into its higher source, its higher potential, connecting yourself with your higher self. your higher nature. This is the movement, the alchemization, the transmutation of tantric energy. This is what is everything. This is the entirety of how we experience true love and pleasure on this planet, that is not just caught up in consuming things that are separate, consuming things that are perceivingly out there. And so the emotional energy discussion and the movement of emotional energy that focuses on the emotional freedom method that I've developed over these past 5 to 6 years, and that many of you have been using. I've sent out a bunch of free resources on it, or many of you have been doing sessions with me to learn the method. It's a process of really recognizing that the quote, "we have everything we need," is basically the idea that, in essence, all the energy we have in our body is all the energy we're going to have. It's just energy that has to be transmuted or open or exponentially expanded. So if right now it's held in the body as guilt and shame and anger and sadness, well, as we move into that, as we feel into that, as we alchemize that, we're literally turning lead into gold. So we do have everything we need. It's just that we may not be perceiving it in the best way, or we may be recognizing that the energy in which we have neglected and not really felt into and looked at is the energy in which actually is providing us the greatest gifts, or has the potential to provide us the greatest gifts. And so this is much of the discussion overall that I've noticed when it comes to the fasting process. And in the breaking of this fast, I've recognized, firstly, food is highly overrated. I really found myself kind of starting to get into a little bit of momentum with the food, wanting to taste things again, wanting textures and all that, but very quickly seeing that the body really isn't wanting it as much. It's not really interested in a lot of that. It does feel more pleasant overall on juices, but I do notice the nourishment essence that is felt when a nice big salad is had, or a nice fruit bowl or something like this. And what I've recognized, as the real topic around the food consumption, at least what I'm noticing now, is that one of the better methods, I would say, is a rotational approach. Rotational meaning we're moving into periods of liquids and moving into periods of food, and doing so in a very methodical and balanced way, where we're not pushing the pendulum too far. Because when we push the pendulum too far, we're generally going to come back in the other direction and have to mitigate the consequences we will face by going back in that direction. Also, we'll see very quickly that we can make balanced approaches with our food consumption, and the things in which we really are craving, the things that are really rooted in our cellular memory, we can take our time with moving out of those cravings, because some of those cravings are very deep-rooted. So, and for each of us, they're different, depending on certain emotional situations we've had in the past that we used food to comfort us, or various traumas and things like this that food's associated with. There's a certain depth that we'll have to move through within those layers of consumption and connection with food to really come to grips with how we can more methodically and naturally just release from things like a leaf falling off a tree. And so as we move in a methodical pace, so for me, I'm moving into a couple days of juices, and then a couple of days of food, or just having juices for the majority of the day and dry fasting, and then a little bit of food, raw, cooked. It doesn't matter too much. I've noticed actually the key about it all is food combining. It's not so much about, as long as you're keeping the foods fairly mucus lean, not highly mucus forming, we recognize that it's really the more damaging element about food consumption is improper food combining, like fruits with nuts, starches, like heavy starches with proteins, even with the fruits, like combining fruits that are just really different in their, digestive times. Food combining is really probably the most important discussion when it comes to food consumption, because if you can just mitigate your food combining, you really can flow through a different, flow of different foods that isn't really damaging to the system. And then as you go back into juice or longer food vacations, you'll really move those things out of you fairly easily, and there won't be really much damage to it. Especially as we're still in the process of recognizing, okay, I may not be ready to go on full liquids, or I may not be ready to go breatharian, or these types of things. And it's been something I've been contemplating, although I do feel a longer period of liquids will begin again soon. There is a nice dance that's occurring here that feels quite right, and very quickly when it doesn't feel right, eating too much, improper food combining, or just having seeing emotions arise and then food being consumed when those emotions are there. It's very clear to see, the nature of these things now. And so, a lot of core topics we went through in this video. These are some of the main reflections that I've been having. I am already launched the Emotional Freedom series and program that has been focused in one-on-one, but will also be moving into a group program that also will be connected into the topic we'll be going into in an upcoming. If you're watching this video on Friday, it's today at 4 p.m. Eastern. The topic is self-realization and food, connecting with the topics of really what it means to fast from a true integral and intentional space, and what it means to recognize the path of devotional love, self-love, self-realization in connection to fasting and food. Because if we're disconnecting them, it actually becomes an irrelevant discussion. They kind of come together and they are inseparable. And so we're going to really dive into this topic, and this is really what this upcoming program that's been launching now, that is really an 8-week focus, at least for the rest of this year. It'll move into 2020, but specifically the rest of this year for people who really want to dive into this process of preparing their energy and their body for what 2020 is going to be. And so for those that are of interest, there will be a link here, and you can send me a message and go into details. Yeah, some juicy things here. So I will see you guys very soon. Make sure you're subscribing, liking, commenting if you're on YouTube. Sometimes these videos are posted on Instagram, so it's beautiful if you share them on your stories. Likewise on Facebook, stepping up the social media flow and content game as I have over this last little while. And I have a new process that I will be releasing in regards to documenting my journey through a new chapter, which is going to be released quite soon. But yeah. Deep love.